Okay, we are back on the air. I screwed up. I hit the wrong button trying to refresh the screen on the Mac. I killed the show for a couple minutes. And what's sad about that, it was the best 3 minutes
it really
Michael
was.
Russo has ever done.
I broke a story. That was the big thing.
Broke
a lot
story.
of Wild fans will not
know.
And
I really can't believe Jack Lemire had that kind of activity off the ice when he was here. I can't believe, and I can't believe you say it.
Yeah, I know. That was another story I should.
And only Jim and John Hank, who are sitting here listening up close and personal, really actually heard that, and now they know what everybody else didn't know. So I guess that's a good reason to come out to the pub. You hear all the inside stuff. I apologize. My fault. I hit the wrong button. Here's kind of the magic question for this team. Because we saw Nashville was the best team in the league for a while, and they may have peaked a little too early. The Wild were lousy for a while. Now they look like they're as good as anybody in the league right now. Are they capable of sustaining this? Is there any chance of this turning into a playoff run, or is it hard to play this well for that long?
Well, I mean, 2 months, that's a long time so far. So, what's really good is that down the stretch here, they play so many tough teams that I think that they're just going to have no choice but to be playing well by the time they go into the playoffs, and that's the way you want. I mean, always the scary thing when you're the top team in the league is that you get complacent and eventually you go down there because you haven't been tested in a long time. You go into the playoffs kind of stale, and
right.
So it's going to be. I do think that this is. They have no choice but to keep its foot on the gas here the last 12 games, and so they should be able to go in there. But again, it really has to do with your matchup, and right now, I don't care how well they're playing. The way it looks like they're going to play Anaheim or St. Louis, and there's zero chance that I would pick them to win that series, and on either one. I mean, there's just none. I mean, and they could. I'm not saying they can't,
right?
But it does depend on your matchup. But they usually don't play St. Louis well. The other night, I mean, let's be honest, they didn't deserve at all to win that game, and Dubnyk was unbelievable. And hey, I mean, the Wild can't even beat Anaheim at home right now. So until that happens, how do you pick that? I think that the Wild can beat Anaheim. I don't think they could beat St. Louis.
I agree with you.
But
again,
I mean, there's a reason why the Wild have lost 6 straight 1-goal losses to Anaheim at home. I mean, so that's.
What's the reason? Tell us.
Well, I mean, they don't have Ryan Kessler, Ryan Getzlaff, or Corey Perry. I mean, it's the same feel every single time. Wild outplay the Ducks every time at home and lose. It's crazy. Now, it's a different story in the playoffs. The one thing I think that St. Louis is beatable is that their goaltending is really a problem. But unfortunately, the Wild never get into the offensive zone. I mean, when they do, the other night they scored. But unfortunately, they spend the majority of their time in the defensive zone, and laws of average say that Devin Dubnyk's not going to do what he did the other night every time.
We've talked a lot about Coyle, about the fact people probably got a little too excited about him because he played so well in the playoffs. And his long-term resume, really doesn't indicate that he's going to be any kind of a great scorer. They want him to be a gritty, tough player. 2 goals last night. Is that a blip or an omen?
Well, you could be a guy that scores 20 to 25 and be a third-line center. And this is what I said to you 2 months ago when we started doing these podcasts is I think they needed to stop bouncing him from right wing and center, and they needed to identify a role for him and tell him to do it well. And for the last 2 months, he has been the third-line center of this team. That's basically the role that I said that they need to turn him into a Rob Niedermayer. But he's got skill. He's got the potential to still be a power forward, and and you could do that from his position. Mm-hmm. So I like the way he's playing. I think that we all get too much on these young kids too quickly. I mean, it's hilarious. You mean
being too hard or too enthusiastic?
No, I think too hard. I mean, some of the tweets I get about Coyle sometimes, you think that he's the worst player ever. I mean, he's a young kid. He's 22. How many people in this town said that Brent Flair screwed up by taking Dumba over Trouba? Give it time. He's a 19, 20-year-old defenseman. I mean, we're all educated hockey people. We should know that, right? I mean, so, it takes time. This kid is going to be a stud, but, not everybody could just step in the way that Trouba does. But right now, are you telling me that if you ask the majority of the fan base here in Minnesota, would you trade Dumba for Trouba? I don't think many would right now.
Right.
This kid, you wish that he was a little bigger. But, man, I mean, his shot, as good as anybody in the league. He's defending magnificently yesterday. I mean, Mike likes to always say point out, you know what? It's kind of his coach speak. It was so predictable last night when he said that offensively, that was exciting. But what I loved is defense. He says that a lot when, especially about his young kids. But that was real last night. I mean, I thought defensively, other than Brodeen, I thought Dumba was their best player last night. So that's what you really are excited to see right now is this kid who looked like he couldn't read a lot in the defensive zone is now always on the right side of the puck. Yeah, you're going to have those high-risk plays. That's what you get. He's still a 20-year-old guy. I know that play that he made in Anaheim that did lose him the game. But you know what? He's an exciting player.
Oh, yeah.
And, he's got this pizzazz to him that not a lot of defensemen in this league have. I mean, he's Drew Doughty without the size. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the exuberance.
Right.
And he's just getting more and more confidence. He's got a cool cockiness to him, too, that a lot of the Wild coaches like. They're trying to keep it in check. It could go the other way, too. I mean, they did that with Zucker. I mean, Daryl Sador will tell you right now that Dumba is a lot like Zucker, and they had to work on Zucker.
Right.
But we're seeing a really cool thing develop here with Dumba.
What's the ceiling with him? Is he a potential star?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he's going to be a offensive guy. It's really interesting, though, how he doesn't get a lot of assists, yet you look again. I mean, which goal was it last night? Was it the Coyle tying goal? I think that
was the Coyle tying goal.
Coyle tying goal. I mean,
Schrader
it was yet another third assist.
Yeah.
It was him that got the puck to Niederreiter. He gets third assists. And a lot of times in the NHL, you shouldn't even count second assists.
Right.
Like it's usually the third assist that's actually the really important play, and he is the king of that. Like how many times does he not get a point, but he is the guy that set up the whole thing? It's happened about 10 times in the last 10 games, and he hasn't gotten one assist. He's gone. I'm pretty sure that Dumba hasn't gotten an assist in like 15 games. It's pretty crazy. But yet he's playing unbelievably. And so I do think that, eventually with his shot and his, willingness to jump up, I think he has the potential to be a star. I think with the Wild system, it is always going to be hard for defensemen to really get a ton of points, but he's got that ability.
Chris Borland retires after 1 year in the NFL. Wisconsin player, 49 linebacker, very good player, very promising player. Retires after 1 year. Worried about the effects of the NFL game on his health, particularly brain trauma. Do you think that has any translation to the hockey world?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. I don't know if anybody's going to retire because of it, but I 100% think that people need to be worried. I mean, this CTE is real. I've talked to Len. I had lunch with Len Bugard, Derek's dad, when we were in Ottawa in I can't even remember, December and November. It was when after they did the selfless thing and they donated Derek's brain to BU for the study, and then they found out they had CTE. The doctors met with the Bugard family and told them, look, almost like it was going to be solace that if this didn't happen, he was going to have dementia in 5 years anyway.
Wow.
Things like that. I mean, this brain trauma with concussions. We're learning a lot. I think that it's really interesting now. I was talking to Zenon Konopka about this a couple years ago. That when it was really on the brink of happening, and now it is out that you can now diagnose this while you're alive. That you don't need to. Before it was just basically it had to be after you passed away. But it's just, look at Keith Ballard. I don't think we're ever going to see Keith Ballard play in an NHL uniform again. And it's because he is so cognizant of the fact that he wants to make sure that he is healthy for his family for the rest of his life. He has had 6, 7 just documented concussions, not the times that you're concussed but you're not admitting you're concussed. And so it's amazing what this guy did to walk away from a career. He played every game last year, right? Mm-hmm. But obviously he is looking at life as bigger than the short career in football. I do think it's a little different in hockey because in hockey you don't have the average NFL career is what? 4 or 5 years, right? Not even.
I mean, if you want to include the people who just have a cup of coffee, it's about 3.5 years.
Yeah,
3.5 years.
And the majority of NHL players, if you want to play, you could play from 20 to 40 in this league, and so you're to totally give up on a 20-year career where you can make a ton of money. I think that would take a ton of self-awareness of long-term health. So I don't know if this will just. But where it might translate into hockey are the guys that are enforcers that think, to make $500,000 for the next 4 or 5 years, I could just go out there and fight, but I don't really love it anyway. Maybe that's the ones that kind of this wakes them up and maybe they walk away. But, I don't know if we're going to see a great player just say, at 24 years old, I'm too scared to continue playing.
Right. To me, the most shocking development of all the things we've learned about brain trauma over the years was not that CTE would be present or that medical science would finally catch up to common sense and realize that if you had your brain battered around for 18 times that you were going to have major problems down the road. To me, medical science is always behind common sense in that regard. What shocked me was when they did studies, and I think they placed sensors in the helmets of small college football players, and they found that just the slight taps to the head, just the your typical practice routine stuff between offense and defensive linemen, where they're not trying to hurt each other, they just happen to smack each other in the head as they're going through the motions. That those things add up to brain trauma as well. That's what's scary, and that's why hockey players and soccer players and lacrosse players should be worried as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, heck, my brother's had a couple concussions, and it still has unbelievable side effects from it, and this is not a professional athlete by any stretch. I mean, this. Well,
Corey Koski, my friend who used to play for the Twins. I mean, when he went through what he went through, he's a father. He's a young, healthy, active person, and after he hit his head, he would have to lay in a room with no lights on during the middle of the day to control the symptoms. And this is a guy who would have to tell his kids, stay away from me for 24 hours. I have to just lay here and do nothing.
I'm really friendly with Cam Stewart, who used to play for the Wild and then the Bruins and, went to Michigan, played for the Florida Panthers. That's where I first covered him. And, he retired because of concussions, and he is still, years and years after retiring, still major, major issues. Head issues, problems, anecdotes where he basically falls down in the shower, things like that. It's scary stuff, man. And, I'm impressed that an athlete like that would read as much as he has on this subject. I am shocked. I will say that I've read some, not stories from professionals, but, flack that he's taken from fans. And
Tim Ryan, the NFL analyst.
Yeah, you have to be completely ignorant to not... first of all, it's none of your. It's his life. It's his life. So to sit there and judge anybody, I would never do that. I mean that from a competitive, and that's just another example. I think all of us, and as sports fans, we take it sometimes too seriously. These are human beings. These are lives, I'm impressed that he's at least educated himself to the point that he made a educated decision. It's the next guy might not do that. He decided to. I don't boo-hoo him at all.
No, not at all. Let's go to Russo's Twitter questions. People tweet me questions to ask Michael on the air. They're always great, very well-informed questions. Let's get to those really quickly. Someone named Intentional Offsides, I don't think that's his real name, asking, looking ahead of these pending UFAs, Bergenheim, Brodziak, Carter, which would you bring back in 2015, 2016? Obviously, UFAs, unrestricted free agents.
Well, that's a great question because I would not bring Bergenheim back. I would bring Carter back. I don't want to make if people are listening to this in your car, keep both hands on your wheel. But if Brodziak would come back at $1 million and a half, I'd bring him back in a heartbeat. He is such an important piece to their penalty kill. I mean, was he not extraordinary on that 5-on-3 yesterday?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
who didn't drive off the road when they heard that? Yeah. As they were listening to us, as I know he is, Brodziak.
Yeah.
He might be speeding now, though.
You just got to accept him for what he is. He makes too much money. He had the perfect time to score 20 goals. He got his 4-year deal cashed out. had a couple tough years in a row. But you know what? He's had a good year this year.
Yeah.
And obviously, I know everybody stone hands, and he can't, as I always say, the reason why he gets all these incredible chances is because he's always in perfect position. The scenes really want Grayovac to be on this team next year, well then they're probably behind the scenes, even though they value Brodziak, or probably say, look, we're not going to be able to bring Grayovac up next year. So, but this is an organization that doesn't have a ton of centers. Certainly doesn't have a ton of right-handed centers. So I don't know. I just think it's something they're going to have to talk about. To me, I would just say it deserves a conversation. If Brodziak says, look, I make 2.5 now, I want 2. Then I'd say you probably walk away. But if he's willing to come back here for $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million, where can you get a stud penalty killer like that for that type of money? I mean, I don't know.
Let's see. Going to give away a book.
I'm going to get ripped for this for
well,
promoting
you're ripped
Brodziak.
for everything. That's what you're here for. It's kind of what we appreciate about you.
First, he called us an idiot for hating the Letty trade. Then he called us an idiot for wanting Dumba out of here. Then he called now Brodziak's God, and we're all idiots.
I'm going to try to give away a book.
I will say this.
Yes?
Amanda pointed out, and I said, and right when Amanda on Twitter, Amanda1593, and right when I said it, I realized it because I know that Nino Niederreiter and Roman Josi are like best friends in the world. But I said earlier in the show that Josi is Swedish. He is Swiss.
Close enough.
They're kind of in the same. They're on the same continent.
I mean, it's kind of like calling somebody a Minnesotan. I mean, they're probably Swiss or Nordy or something like that. It's all a melting pot. Gonna give away the book, Minnesota North Stars: History and Memories with Lou Nanne by Bob Showers. Actually, this was signed to me by Louie Nanne. This is a blatant regifting, and I apologize to Louie Nanne, but I'm blatantly regifting this.
Oh my god!
I
got a ton of books.
Well, start bringing them. We'll start
I
giving
will.
them out.
I will.
I'm not going to read it. I've already been through it. Let me give it to somebody who's supporting the show. So Ryan Mason, Mace to Base on Twitter.
I recognize that name. He tweets a lot.
Yeah, he has won the Minnesota North Stars History and Memories with Lou Nanne. Ryan, when you listen to this, and I know you will, send me a direct message on Twitter or email me, jsuhan@startribune.com, and I will get that book to you in some manner. And now, of course, I got to click a couple times to get back to the Twitter questions. Okay, Ben Feldman.
You know Ben Feldman.
I do know Ben Feldman.
Ben Feldman. We shouldn't say where he works.
No, we shouldn't. Okay, that was Ben Feldman telling us he wants us to get back to the other side of town so he can come to the podcast.
He's a loyal.
He is.
He's a loyal
podcaster.
Stalker.
We like loyal stalkers. Mark Reader 13.
I recognize that name.
On Twitter says, I know Fontaine is a candidate to sit when others are healthy. Instead, I'd like to see him with Parisi. Your thoughts?
He's a candidate to sit when everybody's healthy.
Good
and
answer.
This stinks, man. I mean, it really does. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but it's unbelievable that Mike Yeo is going to have to start taking guys out of the lineup that are playing really well.
Yep.
And that could mess with chemistry. I mean, you're doing it at a real precarious time to sit there and take a team that's this hot and start putting in guys that are cold. I will say I think they've got to be. I think sometimes they put guys in the lineup so quickly, and the fact that they're even pretending that Carter's ready to come back, I think is absurd. I think he should be out at least another week or so. I mean, he's been out since February 9th with a shoulder. And with everybody playing so well, I wouldn't do it. And the problem that, as Mark just said there, is that Fontaine is the guy that will come out. But there's something about him that whatever line you put him on, they seem to score. I mean, talk about third assists. The play he made on the first Coyle goal yesterday, it's interesting. That play that Fontaine made on the Coyle goal was the exact play that Wilson tried to make for the turnover that led to a goal. And but he just did it perfectly. Got the crossed the blue line, went right, gave it to Vanek to Leopold goal to Coyle. And so and Fontaine seems to do that. Even though I thought Fontaine was not good last night, but there's just something about him that just seems to make lines churn. And unfortunately, he's going to be out. And the reason why is because I think he'd be the first candidate because I just think that yes. Productively, offensively, he could generate more than Hala and Brodziak, but you don't. You kind of need the centers in the lineup. And again, they're such valuable penalty killers. I mean, again, Hala last night I thought was outstanding on the penalty kill too. And it does seem like every time they take Hala out of the lineup, their penalty kill is not very good. So I just think that Fontaine's going to be the obvious choice whenever Carter comes back.
We do have a question from loyal stalker Ben Feldman. Of all the young wild talent, who is the most critical to get signed to a long-term deal following this season?
Well, I mean, eventually Dumba is going to be the one guy, and you got to figure out how much you give him. Do you give him the huge deal? Do you give him a little short-term deal? I'd still be careful with Granlund. I think he's injury-prone. I still think it scares me to have a number one center that tiny. And we saw it in St. Louis the other day. That was a bad game by Granlund from the face-off circle out. Just not good. And he's the one guy I'd be careful with. But everybody else is pretty much signed to long-term. I mean, Nino's next. He's going to have to. He got a 3-year deal. They can't sign him this summer, but next year they'll have to figure that out. Coyle's signed long-term. Brodin signed long-term. Scandella's signed long-term. The Spurgeon thing is going to be an interesting thing because he's such an important player. He's a great player. But can you get him on a contract? It looks like Dumba's going to eventually take that role. So can you get him on a contract that he's willing to be happy in a third pair, and then you almost even out the ice times, but he's still, he's on this team, or does this make him expendable? He's going into his UFA year next year. Which usually means that this is the summer you have to make that decision. So do you maybe trade him the summer? Do you extend him? Or do you let him play his year and then decide what to do? Spurgeon is the interesting one going into this summer because they are really going to have to identify where he fits if they believe Dumba is going to take that role because, it's just an interesting quandary because he's an important piece. He's a good piece. But he might want to be paid too, and there's no reason why he shouldn't want to be paid. So that's going to be an interesting one.
Katie Zachman, Katie Halleck on Twitter, very loyal listener. Katie, hope you had a good time in Fort Myers. She says it's not an important enough question for the podcast, but I disagree. She wants to know who you have in the Final Four. And I'm really interested. And you can't put Calgary in the Final Four.
Yeah.
You have to pick college basketball teams.
Okay. I'm trying to remember my bracket. I got Northern Iowa going a long way.
That's not a bad pick.
Yeah, 30-3.
Yeah, they're good.
Yep, I like their uniforms.
Well, there you go.
I said that because Radek Dvorak once. Sorry, Severance Guy, for another Florida reference, but we should have him ask a question.
You worked in Florida?
Yeah, I did. Radek once.
Tell me about that.
He picked it based on uniforms he liked, and he actually won the pool. I have Duke winning it all. That's what I'll say.
My locker room pool story is that Kirby Puckett was so competitive that if he didn't get the team he liked in the pool, he would go around and buy all the teams he liked in the pool. He would spend and I don't know how, I'm going to round off the numbers because they spent a lot of money on those pools back those days. He would spend $1,000 for the chance to win $500. That was his strategy. He just wanted to win, so he bought all the teams he liked.
Nice.
Doubles on Twitter. Vanek's ice time under 12 minutes last two games. He's off the first power play. Has the phasing out process begun?
Say this again. I'm sorry.
Vanek. Fewer minutes.
It's interesting. I mean, he's played 11 minutes the last two nights. Now, last game was because there was no power plays and so many penalty kills. Mm-hmm. But St. Louis, I felt they were hiding him, and that's the coach has been put in a position now for 4 straight years of having to hide one player in the lineup. Now, I will say they've done a really good job of utilizing him the best they possibly can for all his deficiencies because he still has almost 50 points. He's got a 5-game point streak right now. But, in terms of phasing out, that's hard to use that term because he's still got 2 more years left on his contract. He's going to return. They're not buying him out this summer. but it's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to come a point where they're going to scratch him this early.
Right.
And I don't think they should. I mean, he still makes plays, man.
He drives you crazy.
He drives you crazy.
But he ends up scoring.
I mean, he's got, on a team that doesn't, as we just were saying, on a team that has, only 2 goal scorers and not a lot of offense, he still has found a way with all the things that drives every Wild fan understandably crazy.
He's Trevor Plouffe.
Yeah,
you get mad at him and he hits a home run. And you get mad at him and he hits a double.
Yeah, exactly.
Drives you absolutely crazy.
And it's funny. I mean, there have been a lot of games recently where he has scored a huge goal or made a huge setup to result in a goal, and he'll do 2 things the rest of the game, and people are just going crazy on him. But, sometimes he has some habits that make you quickly forget what he just did,
Absolutely. Nino, not his real name. Russo once said on a podcast a while back that he doesn't see Koivu finishing his contract with Wild.
Yeah.
Is this the year the staff attempts to trade him to get value back before his play declines?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, as I've said before, I mean, behind the scenes, they talk about this stuff. I mean, but I think his contract is probably going to be very hard to move anyway. And he's still, if you just forget how much money he makes, he's still unbelievably useful. Mm-hmm. If you want Mikhail Granlund and Charlie Coyle and Eric Haula trying to win draws in a 1-goal game late in the game, you're going to lose every single freaking night. I mean, it's that simple. There's a reason why these guys can't win a draw. Yet, again, every night, 15 of 21, 13 of 20. I mean, that's huge for this team. So, again, if you just forget what he is and slowly but surely you do turn him into, maybe a lesser role, then he's a useful guy. But you can't just get rid of him. They got no size up the middle. And I just, and again, I think he's playing fine right now. But this is
plus the other thing is that I just don't think you get back.
No,
value
you're not. I mean, and again with his contract, I just don't know. He makes is it 675 or 7.2? He makes 7.29 real money.
Russo money.
And then he makes 7.29 and 5.4 every other year. And I think at this point it's probably potentially that ship has sailed. I mean, the later you get into the contract, the harder it's going to be, in my opinion, to move. And again, I mean, I think he's played fine. He was on fire before these trades. I think he had assists up until the last 3 games, up until last night. So, I mean, he's another guy. I mean, they have a lot of guys on their team that, does a lot of things that are very invaluable and then a lot of things that are going to drive the average fan crazy.
Absolutely. A couple more quickies. There's a picture here of the Wild bring the puck down and not really making a great play.
Yeah, this is
from Weldy. Does Yo practice odd man rushes? Sometimes the Wild looks so confused on that.
I will say this: as good as Justin Fontaine is, there is nothing less productive than Justin Fontaine-led odd man rushes. That what happened last night has happened 20 times this year. He just, I don't know, for such a gifted offensive player, and he is. You don't want him leading an odd man rush for some reason. Yeah. But yeah, it is as Weldy just said, it is unbelievable watching the Wild on odd man rushes. They've got to be the least prolific odd man rush team in the league. They usually don't even get a shot off.
No, absolutely.
I mean, it's crazy.
Min Abe on Twitter has Russo
even on a breakaway they don't get shots off.
And yet again they're going to set a team record for goals
scored.
I don't really get it, but it works. Has Russo ever seen another player get booed every time he touched the puck 3 seasons later, like Suter?
Yeah, that's crazy, huh? And they should thank you. They should thank him. I mean,
well, it's a country music town, and they're playing the old country song. My boyfriend left me. I mean, it's basically a Lucinda Williams song they're singing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's like everybody in Edmonton should thank. Well, they probably shouldn't because it hasn't worked. But you thank Pronger because got them all these number 1 picks. Same thing with Suter leaving. They were able to afford Shea Weber. That got them Seth Jones. I mean, there's a lot of things like that. This one's. I've heard players booed every time they touch the puck, but man, this is 3 years later. I mean, this is, it's hilarious, and that is completely their. They sold those fans a bill of goods. I mean, it was so obvious to everybody that Ryan Suter was leaving that organization, which was his right as a free agent. But yet they made it like in that city that Ryan Suter lied to them because they were lying because they wanted to sell tickets. They knew all along They knew all along that Ryan Suter was going to be a free agent, but yet they somehow sold to these fans that he made it like he was coming back there. When, I was writing for weeks he was leaving. And that to me is actually probably one of the things that probably bothers Ryan the most is that, they've turned him into, like he was a liar, which, now you're attacking somebody's credibility. And it's, on June 27th or 26th of that year, their management went to his farm and it was told them point blank, we are leaving. And they came back and they had a conference call, and that was not what was portrayed on that conference call.
Wow. To me, just the idea of Ryan Suter being hated by anybody is just hilarious.
It is.
He's like, I don't know, he's like your typical white bread, Midwest guy. He's the guy you would go. He's the guy if you were living on a cul-de-sac in Minnesota or Wisconsin and you needed milk, you'd go ask Ryan Suter. Ryan, you got any milk? Oh, yeah, here, take all of my milk. That would be the conversation.
And he is, like behind the scenes, the stuff that he does for kids. I mean, he is one of those players that if you saw him in a bar drinking a beer, he would be drinking a beer with you. Like he'd have, he is like the everyday's man. It's really, it's interesting. He wants no part of the limelight, but not in a rude way.
No.
But, trust me, he would, gladly not have to deal with media, because he plays.
And yet,
to
when
play.
I talk to him, he's as good a guy as there is.
Exactly, he plays to play the game.
Favorite Wild players. This is from Doubles. Favorite Wild players or coaches to cover the last, past or present, and the least favorite.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just asking for trouble either way on this one. I mean, I don't
There's
know.
nothing better about this podcast than listening to you get yourself in trouble. It's my favorite aspect of it.
I mean, I don't want to say least Manny Fernandez, but
I'm so glad you didn't say Manny Fernandez.
I had I've had 6 or 7 people here that I could I had no time or use for after dealing with them for a little bit, but that. When you consider that I've covered this team 10 years, that's pretty good. That tells you why I cover hockey. That you could walk around a professional locker room for 10 years and only have 5 or 6 guys that you just didn't like dealing with. And on this team, honestly, every guy is good to deal with. I've really enjoyed getting to know Devin Dubnyk. I'm fascinated by him. Again, yesterday morning before a game, the subject I was talking to him about was a subject that you don't want to do on a game day, and he was unbelievable talking about it. I'll write about it in the next couple days. Probably right now, unfortunately, because of everything that's going on, is that I'm not going to be able to get on C1 Saturday's paper.
Well, I'm not reading it.
So I'll probably write it in my Sunday column. There's... everybody knows. Parisi, these guys. They're all great guys to deal with. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. I like Parisi too because he is more than willing to open up too, as with the whole JP story, and there's another part of that Dubnyk story I'm writing about that is pretty personal stuff with Zach. That it was pretty cool to talk to them about, and I just like Zach that he's willing to kind of share that stuff.
Last Twitter question of the day before we get some other topics here, and Russo's...
We should have Jim ask a question
and
here.
Russo's I spilled coffee on myself, and I had a nightmare travel experience stories, which are always entertaining. When Scandella comes back, this is from Mike, Mel Mike on Twitter. When Scandella comes back, is it Follin or Leopold that sits?
Well, now it'll be Follin. Before it would have been Leopold. Before it would have been Leopold and Follin. But they don't want Follin or Dumba as rookies playing the left side as right shot guys, and so Follin will come out again, and Leopold will stay because he could play that left side. That's my guess. I will say though, and again he's playing the right side, but I was really impressed with Follin's game yesterday. Every time he has been scratched this year, it has not been because of his play. It's because they have a lot of defensemen, and it's a numbers thing. But for him to be scratched 4 straight games and come into that pressure cooker last night and play as well as he did, man, he's a good player. That was a great signing by the Wild. The Wild have been pretty good with their college free agents. I think sometimes in this league now, people go a little too much into this whole college free agent thing. They're college free agents for a reason, for the most part. They weren't drafted at 18, so they're all late bloomers. But you even look at when the Wild went hard after Casey Wellman, but the 25 teams did. Ottawa went hard after Stefan DaCosta, 25 teams did. Those guys really much flamed out. But, the fact that Nate Prosser has played so many games in this league, Justin Fontaine has played so many games in this league, they get Spurgeon as a junior free agent, and now Christian Folin, 20-something teams went after him, and there's a reason for it. I hope he has a future here. But again, it's going to be, it could be as this type of role player, though.
All right, we're done with Twitter questions. Now we're going to do live audience questions. Jim, ask Mike Russo a question, or me, either of us.
Just a comment about Christian Folin. It's hard to figure out where he would fit long term with the defensive core that they currently have. Would he be the guy that they might consider moving to try to bring in a center, or a forward that's, more of a sniper long term?
Yeah, I think that, what you just said is that they're going to have to also figure out, because maybe that's where it makes Jared Spurgeon expendable. If you're looking at maybe a Suter, Brodin, Scandella, Dumba, Olofsson, eventually Folin, then maybe that's when you trade a Spurgeon. Now, if you really think that you want Spurgeon to be here long term, then all of a sudden, if you have Olofsson, Spurgeon, maybe that's Folin, or maybe they look at Folin as a guy that, look, you're going to be on this team. You're going to have to accept your role as being a 6th, 7th guy, and but man, we have a lot of faith in you and trust in you. And every time we have an injury, and we're gonna, because this is the NHL, you just saw it this year, you're going to play. Man, I would hope that they would look at him a little longer term than because he has so many tools. They don't have a right shot guy with that type of build. They don't have anybody on their team. He's 6'5", NHL body, NHL shot, very, very bright. They got to make him a little more physical, but that'll come. I don't know. I hope they don't dangle him yet. And if that's we'll see. Again, the injury, the big thing going into this offseason to me is going to be what they're going to think with Spurgeon, because this is the summer that you're going to have to at least start talking, and that's what I'm sure they'll do. Is they're going to get an idea from his agent Eustace King. What do you want for this guy? And if he starts saying, look, this guy's had a great year, he's peak years in the NHL, we're thinking $4.5 $5 million, that might be the answer that Chuck Fletcher says, okay, adios. But if he's going to be in a lower, more maintainable range, I think Chuck Fletcher would do that, and then that might affect Folin. But if all of a sudden Spurgeon starts pricing himself out role-wise, then that potentially keeps Folin in the long-term plans. So all this is kind of subject to change. Play it by
old friend ear. John Hank is here. John, you got a question for Mike or?
I am absolutely, at all the time that I've been around sports, have never seen a story like Dubnyk.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to decide, has there ever been a trade that has impacted, in any sport, that has impacted a club the way the Dubnyk trade has impacted the Wild in such a significant way?
Yeah. No, that's a great question.
Well,
that'd be a great story idea. Should be my editor. It's unbelievable. I was just on a podcast earlier today on Yahoo, Greg Wyshynski's podcast, and we were talking about, whether or not he should be in the Hart Trophy running.
Oh.
The definition of the Hart Trophy is not most valuable player in the NHL. It's most valuable player to his team. Now, I know Carey Price is going to probably win the Hart, but Dubnyk should very much be in the conversation.
I totally agree.
This team was going to go belly up. They were losing 7-1 routinely, it seemed. They just got killed in Chicago, got killed in Pittsburgh, got killed in Dallas, weren't even competitive. There was no confidence in the goaltending of this team, and he has come in and he's absolutely saved the day. And as you said, the impact that he has had on this team is beyond even belief. And so how can he not be the most valuable player to his team in a conversation? So I can't think of anybody that has absolutely had this type. I mean, you have a better grasp of pro sports than
well,
I do.
The difference is that goalie is just it's such a huge percentage of the game. Like Shannon Stewart came to the Twins trade deadline 2003. They were way underperforming. They were under 500, and they rallied. They were the best team in baseball second half of the season and go into the playoffs. But the pitching staff had to improve 80%, which he had nothing to do with for his contributions to matter. This is different. The goalie is, I don't know what percentage of hockey the goalie is, but it's a large percentage.
Yeah.
It's a larger percentage than any player in baseball is.
Yeah. What is the old term? If goaltending is 100% of hockey, unless it's bad goaltending, or I forget what the term is. I used it in a story.
Next
recently.
podcast, you can tell us what it is. All right, we're down to 7 minutes because Dubé and Tony Dean are coming up next. Another hour of wild talk. They are at Bennett's Chop House. You can listen to that on the Alive and Social Network as well. 7 minutes.
Have you met Tony Dean yet?
Yes, I have.
Tony Dean,
he came to my
St. Paul police
band.
officer.
Yeah, he came to my band's debut.
He told me an incredible story about his first week on the job as a St. Paul cop. When I would never be able to be a cop. Could you imagine me as a police officer?
I couldn't do it.
I wouldn't go into a dark alley.
Plus, I have a temper. I'd either get shot or shoot somebody really quickly.
God,
it would be over for me one way or another really quickly.
I couldn't even.
6 minutes, and we have a lot of stuff I want to do. So let's be quick here. I did want to get to Jason Piant's. I never pronounce his name right, but he's a very loyal Twitter follower, so I want to get to his question. If Scandella can skate, defend at 90 to 100%, how far along does a shot need to be for him to get back in?
Well, to me, that's all the same. I mean, if his shot's only 60, 75%, Jason, then he is not nearly close to ready to play, because the reason why he can't shoot is because this is still an issue. As Scandella has said, this issue that he has had, which I believe is an oblique into rib issue, it affects everything.
Yeah.
And so if his shot's not good enough, then he's just not ready.
Give me your coffee story of the week.
Probably getting chirped here by Jim on the street that I wasn't drinking Starbucks was probably the best one. Nothing will ever. There's no better story than me getting chirped by the barista in Atlanta for stepping behind his counter.
That is
I got
awesome.
screamed
I think
at.
our next sponsor should be a manufacturer of all coffee-colored clothing. You could just buy an entire wardrobe and be safe.
Brown?
No matter what you spilled on yourself, you'd be safe.
Yeah.
Travel story from hell.
Nothing recently.
You gotta have something. Oh, come on.
Nothing.
Something.
Today I was going
I
through.
knew it.
Today I was going through security. Chad Graff from the Pioneer Press could attest to this one. I was going through security at Nashville Airport, and all of a sudden I hear this guy behind me go, "Russo!" And I turn around, and he takes a picture of me. He goes, "Got to send it to my buddies. Got to send it to my buddies." And I'm just like, "Oh my!" Even Chad was like, "Oh my God!"
Was he a cop?
No,
Okay.
It was
Just
it was really funny though. I mean, it was and then the other night I was at Tootsie's in Nashville, which is just a great honky tonk bar. 3 levels of live music, awesome place. I mean, honestly, if you're a Wild fan and want to go to a road city and have an absolute blast between game experience and city experience, Nashville's the place to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it is Nash Vegas. The Broadway, you like live music. Even if you're not a country western fan, you go in, every band is playing covers galore.
I like both kinds of music.
Yeah. It's
Country
just,
and western.
Yeah. It's just, it's just and the game experience is awesome. It's just it's an outstanding arena. And rabid fans, they make it fun. I love that city. And so anyway, Tootsie's, I'm there, and some guy took a picture of me while I might have had a cocktail, and I had to go up to him like, please don't. You don't need to put it on Twitter, okay? I mean, honestly, he took a picture of all of us that were out there, so it's like, you don't need to put it on. Just keep that for your own personal pleasure.
That scares me.
Yeah.
One of my first podcasts was with Craig Leopold, who owned the Nashville team, and he told me great stories about being the owner in
That
Nashville.
was a great podcast.
And he ended up talking, and you still find it at SuhanUnfiltered.com. If you're
Yep.
interested in Craig, go back and find it. It's one of the first ones. Just keep scrolling down until you find it. And he told me, I love the fact he told me he went playing, he played golf with Vince Gill, who is one of the world's great, as a guitarist, let me tell you, he's one of the great guitarist in all the world.
Yeah.
And he said, Vince talks like this, and Vince sings up here too. Vince sings higher than any woman, and Vince talks like this. He's just the most gentle soul, and you see him on Crossroads on Palladium, and he just never raises his voice. And he said he's playing golf, and he's standing in a bunker getting ready to hit his shot, and a 5-iron goes helicoptering through the air over his head. Vince Gill was pissed off and threw his club and almost killed Craig Leopold.
Sounds like me.
My other Nashville references, last week Friday at O'Gara's, I had Tony Winkler and his buddy Chris Nelson from The Last Ride. It's a really good country pop group from here. Tony's going to move to Nashville to like dedicate himself to songwriting and like to study with the greats down there. That's kind of cool.
Nice.
Let's get to our sponsors. We are at the Liffey. First time we're at the Liffey. We're going to be here probably once a week, depending on Michael's schedule.
They have great lunches here at the Liffey.
They have great lunches. They do a great Guinness pour, and that's something I always appreciate. We are drinking Guinness at the Liffey today. Minnesota Eye Consultants is our newest sponsor. Michael is friends with Dr. Samuelson. We'll be giving you more information on them. If you want to check them out, go to MNEYE, MinnesotaEye.com, MNEYE.com. And again, we'll be talking to those people about what they do soon. Friday night. I'll be at O'Gara's 6 to 7 with Dan O'Brien. He's the football operations guy with the Gophers. Great guy, great Minnesota success story. Monday, I will be at the local with a guest to be determined. Then you and I are going to figure out when we're going to do this next week. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We appreciate it. Thanks to Jim and John for coming out. You got a minute or two. Give me your final thought. Stage fright? Got nothing?
Well, I will say
You
this.
always have
I'm
something.
going to.
I'm going to give you a quick one.
Yep.
Chad Greenway, who I really like, one of my favorite people I've ever covered with the Vikings, just won the Byron Whizzer White Award, which is not to be confused with the Whizzinator Award, which Ontario Smith won back in the day.
I liked Phil Miller's story in the Star Tribune today on Gardy going to
yeah.
training camp. I thought that was awesome. Spring training.
Well, I definitely thought it was time for them to move Gardy along. I thought the last couple of years things were really stale.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the coaching staff stopped coaching and started blaming. But at heart, he's a good dude.
Yeah.
At heart, he's a good dude. He's a good dad. He was there seeing his son Toby coach against the Twins on the minor league side. I'm glad he's taking it so well.
Yeah.
Let's face it, getting fired, no matter how much money you have in the bank, is a traumatic experience.
I was a Ron Gardenhire guy when I was a Mets fan. My brother was a Rafael Santana fan.
So he saw both games he played in before he tore his hamstring?
And then I am going Tuesday. I will be on Long Island. Last game
Long
I'm ever
Island.
covering
It's one
at
word.
Nassau Coliseum. Going to be very sad for me. Grew up watching games there, playing soccer on I think it was Astros games or Arrows games. Can't remember now. The old league that the Cosmos were in. Went to the circus there a ton. So it'll be a sad day to be on the rafters there, look up and see the last of those banners. That's going to stink for me. Childhood going away. Also, I got to say, today would have been the 74th birthday of my stepfather, Lenny. Huge influence in my life, and so, thinking about that today.
All right.
Yep.
Michael, as always, great stuff. I appreciate it. John and Jim, thanks for coming out. We're at the Liffey. We're drinking Guinness. Please check out MNEYE.com if you have any LASIK or eye procedures in mind. Again, Friday at O'Gara, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock with Dan O'Brien. Yes, Michael?
I'm going to look up the Jacques Lemaire exact quote
Please
on
do.
Tom Samuelson. I'll get that out. It was very funny.
For updates on when Michael and I will be doing this again, you can follow me at Suhan Strib or Michael Russo Strib, right? Correct? Yep. Did I get that right? Russo Strib. And thanks again. We'll be talking to you soon on SuhanUnfiltered.com.